Morning, everyone, and welcome to the show Handing the Shame Back. My name's Gloria Masters, and I'm the host. This show is dedicated to all child sexual abuse survivors out there in New Zealand and across the world. Because of the nature of the content, some people may feel triggered. If that happens to you, please turn it off, go to the show notes and have a look at where you can reach out to for support. Each week, I hold an interview with one of our survivors, usually from Aotearoa here in New Zealand. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome to the show today, Louise Nicholas. So, Louise, you're not allowed to speak yet because I'm going to introduce you. So, Louise is, she's got many credits to her name, and not the least being she's a fellow survivor alongside the rest of us. But because, you know, in 2007, she was awarded New Zealander of the Year. And the reason for that is because of her absolute courage and bravery and coming forward and taking the police who had abused her to court. So that's the first cab off the ranks, but wait, there's more. She's also an advocate for survivors and for rape prevention here in New Zealand. And she has been for many years, whether we call it officially or unofficially. This woman has given hours and years and months and weeks ad infinitum to help all of us survivors out there. So, wow. But wait, there's more. She also wrote a book in 2014 called This Is My Story. And for those that have read that, powerful stuff. So I think there's one more thing I'd like to say, and then Louise, you might get a word in. In 2015, she was a patron for a class of police recruits at the Royal New Zealand Police College. And she mentored and advised them, and still does a lot of that work today, again, officially, unofficially, with people, teaching them about how to manage conversations actually, and how to treat people who are child sexual abuse survivors as well as rape victims. Louise, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited you're here. And, you know, as you and I were talking pre-chat, we don't know where this conversation's going to go, but we do know it's going to help some people out there who may have already found their voice, but may actually be able to help advocate for others. Or I guess for those that maybe haven't found their voice, but may after listening to this today. So, Louise, what's kind of, when you think about what you're doing out there, and still so active and so helpful to all our survivors, what's some key, I guess, resources you see needing to be provided for people?
Well, as we know, we do have counselling services right throughout Aotearoa, but we are finding that the need is getting right up there, actually coming out the gate. And so typically what is happening that we're seeing is that the waiting period for counselling services is quite long. But in saying that, there's, you know, the likes of myself that hold and support survivors whilst waiting for the professional help, I guess, that some require. I find that a lot of our survivors, Gloria, are more than happy just to be able to tell their story.
Yes.
It's actually just what they want to do. They just want that release of I've held this for so long. I just want to tell somebody. And for them, that's enough. That they're okay to move on And then there's others that, you know, want to tell their story, but actually tell it to the likes of police or, you know, a support service. And where that goes is totally up to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's such power in that, telling that story, and it doesn't even matter who it is. It's just finding the words and actually being able to express them creates a form of freedom in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And we do find too that it's and it's the person who they're talking to. Sometimes they just don't even need to say anything, you know, and that is power in itself. It's just I've been able to tell. There's been no judgment. There's been, okay, well, this is what we're going to do to fix it, because there is no fixing it, you know. So it's there's a lot of us out there that are prepared to just to listen.
And man, that's so powerful as well, because when you think about it, what do we want to do? We want to help. Sometimes with the best will in the world, our form of helping is to advise or to tell someone how to do something or what to do. At the end of the day, though, what you've just said, the most powerful thing is to audience out there, just listen. Listen.
Yeah.
There's so much power. Why do we think that dogs are man and woman's best friends? Because they can't speak. They're listening. And that's so powerful. Yeah. In your opinion, Louise, what else can help our survivors out there?
Well, there's well, I just think it's been well supported, and but also it's not just for our survivors being supported, it's actually for their family and whānau and their friends. Because once a disclosure is given, especially within the whānau environment, the whānau are going, okay, so now what do we do with this? So we actually get in and support them to support our survivors, and just giving them tools. Again, it's just about listening. It's about no judgment. It's, you can't fix this. Just literally be there. Resource wise, I mean, there's a lot of books out there to read. You know, the other thing that we advise our survivors is to actually, when you've got those thoughts in your head, write them down. Have that special book, and write everything into that book. And then at some stage in your life, you may turn around and say, you know what, I've done all I can. So now I'm going to have a burning ceremony. You know, because sometimes we it's healthy to look back at our past in order to understand why we keep moving forward. So writing everything down, rereading it, writing more stuff, that is actually can be really really quite powerful.
And it's an interesting point you raise, because I know in New Zealand we just really don't have enough in the way of resource for survivors, let alone families, whānau, friends. And I guess that's one area where really, you know, my wish would be to have a nationwide campaign actually, and have a whole big charity set up so that friends and family could get some support to help support their loved one who's struggling.
Yeah. And sadly, there's not a lot out there, which is wrong, because you know, when we look at our stats, you know, our 1 in 3 girls, and I'm going to say 1 in 3 boys.
Yes.
You know, don't give me this 1 in 6. That's just rubbish. And the reality is, it's like my brother from another mother, Kenny Clearwater, said, you know, we actually don't know what the stat is for our men and boys, because no studies really have been done on it. And our men and boys do not come forward as often as what our female survivors do.
No. And the reason for that, of course, is because, you know, it's given a completely different lens and focus, big boys don't cry, you know, just suck it up, never talk about it, and also never being given permission to share it means the shame just builds more and more in them. And, you know, I totally agree. I spoke to the police who said, look, we've had reports as much as 1 in 3. I'm going with that, Louise, male and female. And really, I find the silence out there, that I call this a silent endemic. Why is this not getting attention?
Yeah, exactly. And it comes down to, like, we you know, literally beg, steal and borrow for funding to provide services and all that. And it always comes down to the dollar, and that's where it's wrong. They're not looking at the human impact of child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
They're not looking at the impact on that person's life, and, you know, with now that person, because they haven't had the opportunity to get with a service and get their needs met, or they're going through with suicidal things,
Ideation.
and, you know, they turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, you know, this whole way of trying to push away the demon that sits within. But, you know, which we don't actually need to do, because what has happened to us was not our fault.
No.
You know, we don't need to carry that shame and blame ourselves for what has happened. That totally goes back on those that have perpetrated the harm. And it's helping people understand that. So when we're doing court support and we've got survivors that, you know, literally walk into the court and they're just pummeled with you're a liar, you know, you went there, so, you know, literally you deserved everything that you got. But we say to them, you know what, at this point in the process, you walk into that court, you tell your truth, because that's all you know. And I guarantee when you walk out that you leave all that shit that has been sitting with you in that courtroom with the person who actually deserves it. And regardless of the outcome, you will find that you have regained the power and the control. And it's and 99% of the time, our survivors are walking out going, mate, you were so right. That felt so good.
Yeah. And man, what a lot of courage it takes them. And, you know, when you've mentioned shame, which is so powerful, and you've mentioned human impact, I'm trying to keep up, Louise. You mentioned all of that. No, it's great. And I'm thinking, you know, shame is what renders us silent. It keeps us hidden. It keeps us small. It keeps us not able to speak. And it all begins because when you think about it, as a child, the adult had the power. The adult had the kind of the control, was always going to be seen as right in any situation. And so it's no surprise to me, really, that as adults, we've carried that through. And it's only through what you're doing and through education and letting people know, actually, the shame never belonged to you, that people start to see, actually, look, it didn't. It wasn't my fault. I was a child. And that's why we're doing this, handing the shame back, because we need to stand up loud and strong and proud, actually, that we got through. We got through, Louise. And, you know, one of the other things you talked about was coping mechanisms and the cost to society. You know, Kenneth, our friend Kenneth Clearwater, was telling me that, you know, males in prison are 5 times more likely to commit suicide that have a history of child sexual abuse. So there's a cost right there, let alone the drugs, alcohol, domestic violence, life of crime that awaits those of us that can't speak.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I mean, we know that the majority of those sitting in our prisons, male and female, are survivors.
Yes.
I went to a women's prison in Wellington and spoke to 22 prisoners, women, who were on their journey through the alcohol and drug rehabilitation part. And we talked about, you know, the sexual violence and domestic violence. And out of those 22 women, only 2 hadn't been sexually abused as children.
Wow.
And the stories were so powerful. You know, I had one lady there, she's got 8 children, and she said, you know, because of her offending, she worries herself sick every minute of the day as to what is happening to her 8 children, because she, you know, obviously what happened to her as a child. And so it's that intergenerational, it's that you know, it's that whole mechanism. We need to be helping those women and those men in those prisons.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to be educating right from the day dot, actually, right through schools.
Absolutely.
Hence the nationwide campaign. I know when you and I spoke about this last week, you'd mentioned to me, you know, you call this, what did you say? It was lovely. The silence is deafening, I think.
Yeah.
Louise, what can we do? How can we make this more public? How can we move this so that people don't suffer? 1 in 3 is well over 1 million, 1.5 million people in our country alone. Yeah. How can we make our voices louder? How can we get what we need?
I look at it this way. It's about education. You hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
It's about teaching our young people. It's okay to talk. It's okay to speak out. It's okay to look at the prevention side of the issue as well. You know, harmful sexual behaviour. You see something that you and your gut is thinking that's not right. It's okay to speak up. You know, it's giving them permission. This is actually okay. When you see a friend who's drunk as a skunk and you've got people hovering around him or her, you have the right. And if you don't feel you can, then you find somebody who can help support you in doing what is right for your friend.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it's, look, we blame alcohol, we blame the drugs, but what we don't blame is actually people's behaviour.
Yeah.
And because, you know, they say, oh yeah, but you know, she was pissed, or you know, he was drunk and, you know, just thought she was up to it. No. This is where we give permission to actually speak up, speak out.
Yep.
And it's not about doing it in a nasty way. It's just, hey bro, come on. Not appropriate.
No.
Eyes are on you.
And I love what you're saying, and it makes me think of something I heard the other day. It's not a Gloria original, but you'll so resonate with this. What percentage of rape is the rapist's fault? Answer, 100%. Whether someone's had too much to drink, whether they're dressed in a way they wanted to, whether they were outrageously having fun or flirting.
Yeah.
There is no percentage of fault that lies with the person that was raped.
Exactly.
Yep.
And that is what we need to get out there into society, help them understand.
Yep.
Don't look at a person because of what they were wearing or how much they had to drink. It comes down to that person who offended against them made the choice to do it.
Yes.
Their choice.
100%.
So,
yeah. 100. I can almost see it as a billboard on the side of the road. Got to get something out there, Louise. If you're comfortable, it would be great for our audience to understand, you know, as a CSA survivor, kind of what you experienced, what you went through, what's led you to this today, if you're comfortable.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because there'll be people that don't know my story.
They won't know, and we have people in Germany and Switzerland and across the world watching. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Oh. Kia ora to everybody out there in the world. So I was raped from the age of 13 to the age of 19 by members of the New Zealand Police. And people say to me, yeah, but at the age of 19, you know, you should have been able to do something about it. Yeah, that's another story on its own. So I went through 2 years of living in a small town, being raped often by a policeman. And then when we shifted out of that little town and moved to the bigger city, all of a sudden his friends came knocking, and so it carried on. So in those years, those 6 years, I was raped repeatedly by about 4 members of the New Zealand Police. It was I met my husband. We've been married 34 years now. And the funny thing about that was, because I needed somebody to keep me safe, I actually asked him to marry me. I went and bought the engagement ring and everything. And he said no.
Oh.
So,
big mistake.
Yeah. It was a dumb answer. Finally convinced him, because what he didn't know at the time was that he was actually saving my life, because I did try to end my life, especially when I between the age of 13 and 15, tried several times. So when I met Ross, it was he was my knight in shining armour. And so I convinced him to get married, and we did. And that's when everything stopped. But I thought I was normal. I thought that, you know, I'm happy now. We started to have children. But it was my father-in-law who actually said to me one day, what's your problem? And I said, what do you mean? I've got no problem. He said, no, you have. The family quite worried about you. And I says, well, I don't know. I mean, you know, he said, what's going on in your life that we don't know about? And I think that was the turning point for me. And I said, look, you know, bad stuff happened to me when I was younger. I gave him a brief outlay of that. And because he thought that I was on drugs, or the family thought I was on drugs, or sly grogging, or I had another relationship going on behind Ross's back. You know, this was all this, even though I thought I was normal as hell.
Yeah. And
so when I told him, he was quite silent for quite a while, and he just turned to me and he said, you know, mate, it would have been easier if it was the drugs or the alcohol or another bloke, but he said, we need to get you some help. And so back in that time, which was the early 1990s, you go to the doctor, the family doctor, and they help you get counselling. And that's what I did.
Wow.
So, and it was the counselling that helped me, gave me the tools to understand that what happened wasn't my fault. And it also got me to a stage where I got angry. And I thought, I've got to do something about this. What do I do? And the counsellor said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to the police. And she said, right, let's do it. And so that was the start of the journey into the police process and into the courts. So over the next, well, right up until the first trial was in 1992. And the last trial was in 2007. So I've been through the criminal justice system 7 times.
Wow.
Just trying to get my justice. And people say to me, you know, if it all happened again, would you still do it? Would you go back through that process? I said, hell yeah, because that's what helped me heal. That's what helped me understand that everything that had happened wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
And so, you know, part of the story for me was, like that person said, you know, you were 19 at the time when, you know, you pulled up to the house and you knew what was going to happen because you said that in court, but you still got out and you went into that house and bad stuff happened. I said, yeah. And I could never understand why I allowed that. I allowed me to know exactly what was going to happen if I got out of that car. And it wasn't until they made a movie from my book called Consent.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was actually watching that movie that I finally realised that it wasn't the 19-year-old getting out of that car.
Yes.
It was the little girl.
Yeah.
Who's, you know, and I think that's what people need to understand, even though, you know, I'm in my, you know, my 50s now, and I support women and men who are survivors of childhood sexual abuse, but you've got say a 40-year-old woman sitting in that in the witness box.
Yeah.
No, you haven't.
No.
You've got that little girl.
Yeah.
You know, so it's helping people understand that. You go back, you actually relive everything regardless of your age.
Yeah.
So that was a defining moment for me.
Wow.
Now I understand why I got out of that car.
So powerful, Louise.
It was an amazing moment. I just cried. I cried for hours because I finally understood. Yeah.
Well, you were the young 13-year-old.
Yeah.
You were the young girl.
Yeah. But what we find, and being able to live through all that and have a better understanding, it's like, you know, when I look back at the time that this cop was doing bad things to me as a child, it was, I can see it now. He actually groomed my family, my mum and dad. He got them on side. Yes. He got to a point where he would ring my dad and say, hey, we need Louise to babysit. And I would say, no, I can't. And Dad say, well, yes, you can. Yeah. You know, so, and my dad, I mean, both mum and dad carried so much guilt. And I said, but you can't, because he groomed you in order to get to me. Yeah.
It's so powerful. And what, you know, a couple of things out of that, you know, you talked about it was the 13-year-old that got out of that car when you were talking about your story. And, you know, it's that conditioning. We are conditioned and conditioned and conditioned, even though I imagine your body, your heart's sinking, you feel sick, you're shaking, you're terrified. But the child in you is responding to that conditioning. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the double whammy, of course, is not just that the adults have the power, but also the police have the power over the adults as well as. And then you talk about that. So I guess for our audience out there, please be aware that because we have been conditioned, we will, even as adults now, we will often say yes to situations where we mean no, or we'll often do that people pleasing, or that's a fault, or something, a hangover I had to deal with in my adult life, as one of the hallmarks of that, and that you are still to be applauded, because it just, in a way, it vindicates us, because what it does is confirm that, man, what happened to me was so powerful. I can still experience it today when in some situations. And the other thing, Louise, and I think this is so powerful for the audience too, is the grooming. Because there's a little myth out there that actually the grooming only occurs with the children. No, they get the parents on side.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I had a friend who him and his partner got into that swinging thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is no judgment here, no, none whatsoever. My concern was that, and I mean, I know that pedophiles will bring themselves into that swinging group. Now, the reason they do that is so that they befriend the adults, and they'll say, okay, well, look, you go to that swinging party, I'll look after the kids. So it's just, and that's what I explained to our friend, that, you know, you have got children, whatever you do, you get a babysitter you trust. Don't let anybody in that group, you know, so and that threw them. They just didn't even think outside the square on that one.
Wow.
Because they did have a male friend that did offer, and I said, well, never accept that offer. No. But yes, no, you're right. You know, the grooming, actually, they, especially, you know, for those that are wanting the children, will do everything they can to bring the parents and caregivers on board and think that they're safe to be with that person. And it's, but you know, people say, well, how do we choose that? How do we know that? What you know, if we've got somebody who wants to look after the kids, but it's like, if you've got to do everything on your gut, you know, but if something has happened to your child, it's kind of like that child may say, look, honestly, Mum, I don't want to go with uncle or auntie or whatever. That's fine. Then you don't need to ask the reason why. If they say, I just don't like it, like for a lot of us, especially, you know, here in New Zealand, we're just such happy people, love hugs and kisses. But if you've got a child who says, I actually don't want to kiss uncle or auntie, don't make them. Yeah. It's please listen to your children. Yeah. That's it, you know, and you don't need to ask why. And you just trust in them. Yeah. Trust in yourself, to be honest. Well, it's interesting you say that, because children know. They may not always have the languaging or the, you know, that cognition or cognitive ability to understand something, but man, they know it, they feel it, they understand that something's off or not right. And I guess for us as parents, and in your case, grandparents out there, we think, come on now, just do what you're told. But I agree with you, Louise. I think if we can, please just pause and think, you know, that's the second time my daughter or son or grandchildren have said, oh, don't make me go with him, don't make me go, or her. And yeah. And like there was one day, because I've got a 14-year-old son. He was actually an ops. Yeah, very unexpected. Is at my age. The surprise. Oh, the gift. What? And we were at a friend's place, and the adults were having a conversation, and the little fella came along, and he was going, Dad, and Ross was, you know, talking to somebody, and Ross turned around and he said, Luke, you're to be seen and not heard. And I just pulled my husband aside and I said, hang on a minute. No. I want to hear what my son has to say, and I want him to be seen. I said, if anything, you just say to him, one moment, Luke, I'll get to you in a minute. I'll just finish this conversation. You know, so it was explaining to, but that's how we grew up.
Yes.
We all grew up like that.
Yeah.
We were, you know, you go and play in the room with all your cousins and everything, you know, while the adults do their thing.
Oh, get outside and play.
Yeah, absolutely. Children are to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
I want to hear our kids.
Yeah.
You know,
and I agree with you. And I guess my only concern is, to be honest, Louise, you know, this all happened to me in the 60s and 70s. We're now in 2022. Stats haven't lessened.
No.
This is on the rise. And so it's kind of, people are becoming a bit more insidious. These pedophiles are becoming more insidious. They've got the web now. They know how to groom online, all of that. But I think as parents and adults who are trying to protect children, we must listen. And it was quite concerning to me the other day interviewing Ken when he talked about, Gloria, I've only ever been allowed to speak in 2 schools.
Yes. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like, you know, the old adage, yeah, if we talk about suicide, especially to our children, they're going to go out and commit suicide. What a crock.
Yeah.
What a crock. What we do in speaking out and being upfront and honest with our kids is that they're going to respect the fact that you're not going to treat them like children.
Yes.
You're actually having conversations they actually want to hear. And
Yeah.
don't glorify it.
No.
Don't try and make it all cotton candy. Say it how it is.
Yeah.
This is the reality.
Yes.
It's like my oldest girl said to me when all my stuff was going on, I literally had them wrapped in cotton wool. And my girl said to me, Mum, you don't need to wrap us in cotton wool anymore. We are going to be okay. Because we had to have those hard conversations with the kids.
Yeah.
And they know my story.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until recently my son Luke said, Mum, tell me your story.
Wow.
Because he went to the library one day with his school class, and here's my book. And he's
Oh, Louise.
and he's, look, my mum's famous.
Oh.
And I said to him, you know, if ever you want to know, when you think the time is right, you come to me. And I said, I'll tell you my story.
Yeah.
And that happened.
Yeah.
And I was so proud of him. And the one thing I said to him was, what you've got to remember, son, is that it wasn't the New Zealand police that hurt me. It was individuals within. So please don't go hating on the cops, because I don't.
No. That's been huge. And I think for our audience out there, when Louise was going through all of these court cases and trying to get justice, actually, and shine the light on this to help others, there was this wonderful scene, Louise, and I know I cried and I know other people did, where you were up in, must have been a motel room, and there were all these people with candles, and I believe you, Louise, and it was so powerful. And it brings me back to this for all of us CSA survivors. You are believed. We believe you. Some of the most honest people I know have suffered child sexual abuse. And we don't gain anything by telling our truth in terms of there's no monetary gain, there's no fame anyone seeks, there's no kind of lookatme.com. Yeah. No, we'd rather hide under a rock, frankly, but the gift is in the freedom it brings to speak. And I think due to the lack of services out there or the lack of attention, we've got a third of us people. Now, if we've got a third of us as survivors, there's a certain percentage who are actually the pedophiles, and I'm sorry to say this, but it's true. There's also another percentage who are aware of it. So, Louise, look at those numbers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know statistically that, you know, one offender can have up to 50 victims in his or her lifetime of offending.
Wow.
We know that, definitely. And so, you know, even though, you know, a person may you know, get a alleged offender to court, quite often that jury do not know that that person has offended against others. So it's just, you know, and that's why people say, you know, but the court process is brutal. Yes, but it's only brutal because, you know, you've got an offender who's told absolute porkies to his lawyer, and his lawyer can only ask what his client wants him to ask. So yeah, it is brutal, but you know, at the end of the day, when you know your truth, you can't deviate from that. You just can't. No. And regardless of the outcome, whether it's guilty or not guilty, that really isn't your goal. Your goal has been to the courage and you know, the amazing, I don't know, it's just to see that person walk into that courtroom and speak their truth and walk out again and go, I did it. I did it.
Yes.
It's just the most amazing. And like I say, regardless that, you know, if it's a guilty, great. If it's not guilty, that doesn't matter. The only reason it's come back not guilty, as we tell our survivors, is because there wasn't quite enough evidence to prove on reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the threshold.
Yeah.
But you've done it.
Yes.
You know, it's just, oh, we get so choked up, especially when it's our little fellas. Like, you know, the youngest I've supported in court, she was 6 years old.
Wow. And
the defence lawyer was, you know, telling her she was a liar. Everything that she was talking about was that's a lie. And she just lost it and said to this lawyer, you don't know, you weren't there. And he kind of like went, oh. Our children can't lie.
No.
They literally don't know how to.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to this.
Yeah.
You know, but we have, you know, a lot of people, well, we've had people say that, you know, especially younger women, they've just made up this nonsense because, you know, the boyfriend wanted to, you know, go into another relationship, didn't want her anymore. And so, you know, we have these false allegations. Well, I know for a fact that the false allegations that, you know, we knew about, they weren't false. What they were was, for a lot of them was, yeah, I blame my boyfriend. I said it was my boyfriend, but the reality is it was actually my father, or it was a member of the family. Now, they don't want, especially young people, don't want to see dad or uncle or auntie go to jail.
Yeah.
So they make up these lies.
Yeah.
It's just, they're still trying to protect. And at the end of the day, especially when it comes to family members harming family members, our survivors still want to protect them. What they want, they don't want them to go to jail. But as we say, you know what? If your parent or relation is true and is remorseful, the best place for them to be is in prison so that they can get the help they need. Yeah. And when you look at it that way, then not that it's okay to send somebody to jail. No, it's not. But they shouldn't have done what they did.
Yes.
And if they've been proven beyond reasonable doubt, that you actually did do that to your family member, then it's time for you to get the help you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really quite powerful, isn't it? Because it's just complex. There's the person who's suffered the abuse, finally finding the courage, or some part of them wants to heal from this, perhaps making up a story, or not able to fully express who it was, because of course they love that person, whether it was dad or older brother or uncle or whoever. And so there's the dilemma, because they still have deep, heartfelt love, and it makes it so confusing. I still find it interesting, though, how even today, a lot of our judicial system is, they say it's not, but can be seen as being, you have to prove this beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I think, what 6-year-old will bother making that up? They wouldn't even know what it was.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think people are frightened of the court system. I think don't be afraid.
Yeah.
This is your time to tell your truth and hope to get the help that person needs. It's as long as you're well supported, and as long as your family are well supported, who are supporting you. I mean, we've supported 60, 70-year-olds telling their truth about, like one lady, after my story came out, she wrote me a letter. She was 86 years old, and she said, "Thank you for what you have done, Louise, because now I have the courage to let my family know what happened to me when I was 10. Yeah, and she held that, 76 years.
Wow.
And so she said, it's given me the courage to talk to my family about it so that my grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to be safe. And that's what it's about. It's about, let's talk.
Yeah.
It's okay to talk about this stuff. Talk to your kids.
We need to normalise the conversation. That doesn't mean we normalise what happened. We normalise the conversation. We bring light to it. We bring air to it.
Yep.
If people stay hidden in the shadows, can you imagine that's 76 years of suffering in silence?
Yeah.
And imagine what that does to somebody. So, Louise, one of the things I think is useful for us out here listening to you is, what helped you? I mean, in terms of what helped you move through and recover and find your voice. I'm thinking from the age you perhaps were able to tell your parents. How was that for you?
Yeah, well, I honestly, it was when I was 15. I was made to go and live with the perpetrator. Again, they, moved to the city. I lasted 3 months because it just carried on there. And so I remember my dad coming to pick me up, and we were driving back into our little town, and he turned to me and he said, "Louise, I'm so disappointed in you." And it broke my heart because I couldn't tell my dad why. I just kept saying I was homesick. And then it was my typing teacher who actually pulled me aside one day, and she said, "I've noticed a great decline in you, Louise. You're not that bubbly kid that I knew before you went away. Is there anything I can help you with?" And I thought, I've been asked. And again, I told her what had happened, and she tried her best to get help. But the one thing I said to her was, please do not tell my parents, because I was frightened about not them disbelieving me. I was frightened that he was going to come and hurt them.
Yeah.
If my dad did find out, I knew that my dad would go to him and probably kill him. That was my thinking. So it had to stay a secret. As it was, the typing teacher did actually tell my mum, which was the best thing ever. But Mum and I agreed that we couldn't tell Dad, because even Mum said he'll kill him. Simple. So yeah, I just it's all that, and it's about finally understanding within myself. Like I said earlier, you know, I soon realised that it wasn't my fault. People say, you know, do you still have triggers? Do you still, you know, fall back? Not as often. But like I've also said, you know, it's okay to look back in order to understand why we keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And it was the absolute support of my husband and my children and my wider family that gave me the courage to speak up, speak out, and having that support. And I know there are people that don't, but that's why we do encourage, find that support. There are people out there, there are services out there that will support you in your journey to heal.
Yeah.
And I found mine through and I guess at the end of the day, I just got really shitty.
You found your anger.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, you guys, because I knew that what those men did to me, they did to 72 other women.
Wow.
So, you know, I just thought, no. You're not going to get away with this. And 2 of them ended up in jail. Yes, 1 didn't. But his career was over. And, you know, I just thought, what happened to me? Why I do what I do is because what happened to me, I don't want to have happen to anybody else. So, God damn, yes, I'm going to fight.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be that nuisance who's just going to keep pissing people off. Excuse the language, but
you be that role model that pisses everyone off, Louise.
Yeah. I can't
love it.
Stand that you know, that judgment. I can't stand people saying, "Oh, it was her fault. It was his fault." Yeah, nah. Walk in my shoes for one day, and let's see how far you get.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, and the audience don't know this, but one of the things that I spoke to Louise about earlier was, you know, it's because of women like you and other fabulous people out there who, people like me, can actually stand on your shoulders, because you've led the way, and we can now find our voices, and we can start this spreading further, or as much as we can, to try and help other survivors. So it's because of your courage, and, you know, whether it was your anger that fueled it, who cares? You got something going, and that's just so powerful and so helpful. It's a light for us to follow, and I think that's really important. Had you not done what you did, Louise, I don't think this would be exposed. I was going to say as much as it is, because it's not hardly at all. But the fact that you're able to do the work you now do is because of your story. So I thank you, and I know lots of other people in New Zealand do as well. There's great excitement knowing you were coming on to help hand the shame back, and even in the talking and recounting of your story, you know, every time we do it, there's a bit more release. It doesn't matter how old or how young we are, it can feel quite cathartic. And I know you and I talked at the beginning about how every story's different.
Every survivor is unique.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
And so you need to heal is unique, and it's just sometimes we just walk beside. We don't walk in front. We don't walk behind. We're just there, and if you fall over, we pick you up and we keep you moving forward. Sometimes we've got to go back a wee bit. That's okay.
Yeah.
We just, that direction forward is the best direction ever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. What advice would you give to our survivors out there, our fellow CSA survivors? Any kind of anything that specifically helped you, or anything you now know is fabulous? You know, you've mentioned keeping a journal, you've mentioned talking to someone, it doesn't matter who it is, you've mentioned actually just being able to I guess stand in your truth and know your truth. Anything else, Louise, you think can help our survivors out there in navigating their way through this?
Yeah, honestly, believe in yourself.
Yeah.
You know, that's the big one. Just keep reminding yourself of you're a strong wahine toa, you're a strong tāne, you can move forward, and there are people out there are services out there that will support you in your healing. And whether that's through the police process, the courts, or whether it's just through talking, believe in yourself, because sometimes little steps are often faster, and it is one foot in front of the other on this journey. And be prepared for the emotional roller coaster. You are going to be up one day and down the next. That's okay. Yeah. Don't judge yourself too much. If you, like, I had this lady, and she was an older lady, and we were supporting her, and she could not say the word vagina, but it was a part of her evidence. She just could not say it because it just did too much for her, and you know, remembering what happened.
Yeah.
And so we broke for the end of the day at court, and she said to me, I can't say that word, it hurts too much. Yeah. And I said, when you get home, I said, you get into the bathroom, you look in the mirror, and you just say vagina. Vagina, 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 vagina. Just keep saying it. And she came back to court the next day, and you could just see this uplift in her. And she said, I like my vagina, and I'm going to say the word vagina. You wait. I said, you go, girl. And she did.
Oh.
But it's kind of like she needed permission.
Yeah.
You don't need permission.
Yeah.
You know your truth.
Yeah.
You know, you just, everybody, as we've said, is unique. And there's always that somebody out there who will walk beside you.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. So I'm going to ask Louise to hang on for a minute. For the audience out there, wow, I've got goosebumps. It was another fantastic interview, handing the shame back through our hero, actually, Louise Nicholas. And what an honour and privilege. For those of you that would like to see more of this, please go to gloriamasters.com. Feel free to fill out the online form if you would like to be a guest on the show. Just a note though, guys, I really am dedicating this to fellow survivors of child sexual abuse. Why? Because we really need this. We need this platform. We need this exposure. I want to keep it truly to you guys out there. The other thing is, if you go to Handing the Shame Back, you can subscribe. It's in podcast form as well. And look after your wonderful selves. Thanks for being part of it. And we'll catch up next time.